Okay, so now we're at section 2.6 in the Smart Book, where the author goes over determinism, metaphysical determinism, generally speaking. When the author is talking about determinism in some parts of the book, he's talking about the principle of universal causation. And so that's what he's talking about at some point in this section, but it's under the more general discussion of hard determinism. Just remember that determinism, insofar as it's about the principle of universal causation, is something that both the hard determinist and the soft determinist endorse. Okay, so that said, let's go ahead and just go over very quickly where you can find this information that is listed here. So you see view of determinism, so you already got the gist of that in 2.5, I believe. And now you're going to get more, in section 2.6, you get more in-depth understanding of hard determinism. But, what does the hard determinist have to say about the notion of determinism and the principle of universal causation? And how does that, what kind of implications are there for how the hard determinist sees the possibility of acting freely, and hence what sense it makes to and what sense it makes to hold people morally responsible or claim that they can be held morally responsible. So even though you already got an understanding of this perhaps from 2.5, you're going to get more information, more in-depth insights that you may need to be aware of for an item in the test that may be in the form of multiple choice or true false. So this is meant to capture everything you've already learned about hard determinism, and then the new things that you will have or have learned about in virtue of reading this section in this chapter. Now, in terms of order, you're probably going to get this information right here first, the hard determinist critique of libertarianism. So let's go to that section. So here you have leading questions, and then you get the debate over determinism. And then you can see that he gets into surveying the case for hard determinism. He gives a little bit of context, a background story. Then he gives you the problems with libertarianism. So when in the study guide, I say the gist of HD's critique of libertarianism, that's the hard determinist, I am directing you now to go to this part of the reading in section 2.6 and just know the gist of what the hard determinist has to say about libertarianism in terms of the view, problems with the view, issues with the view, critiques that it makes about the view. You don't have to know every single thing that's in this paragraph, but you have to know the gist of what it is that the hard determinist is saying about libertarianism and what's problematic about it. So that's what I'm talking about right there. And as you can see, it's kind of toward the beginning, or, prior to where he starts talking about what he calls the positive case for determinism. So this part is in the section of 2.6 that he calls the negative case for libertarianism. And this part is actually going to come before these two parts. So then when he starts to make the positive case for hard determinism, that's where you get information for this bullet, where I tell you I want you to know basically what does the hard determinist say about predicting human behavior, how much of it can you predict, and if you can, and given the extent of human behavior or how much you can predict about human behavior, what are the implications with respect to freedom and moral responsibility, and maybe some other implications that Lawhead brings up. So you'll get that information right there. When you get that information, you'll also be getting information, or you'll do a review of what the hard determinist, how does a hard determinist explain the concept of deliberation and the will. So that's going to be in this section here. Now, what he first gives you, so remember this is talking about what hard determinism, but what he does first is he comes back to, because notice what this says right here, making the case for hard determinism, right, the positive case, the positive and negative case. So first he makes the negative case. Here, he's going back to the position of determinism that he talked about in section 2.5, okay? Really, when he's talking about determinism, he's talking about the principle of universal causation and that how that informs a theory, the theory that everything is caused. So I want you to be careful because Lawhead doesn't always do the best job making it really clear that sometimes he's just talking about metaphysical determinism, the idea that everything is caused. That view is also held by the soft compatibilist, the soft determinist, what he tends to call the compatibilist in this chapter. So right here, everything that he says about determinism as the metaphysical theory that includes the principle of universal causation is also true of the theory that he calls in this chapter compatibilism, but that I like to call soft determinism. So again, you've got to keep that in mind. Everything that he says in this subsection is true of both those theories. Okay, so that's where you're going to find a lot of helpful information and insights and things to note, jot, write down. What else do I want to say about this? Yeah, really important information here and insights that you need to be aware of and understand when it comes to some multiple choice and true-false items. Make sure that you fully understand what it is that the determinist thinks, and know that as he's explaining determinism, he's explaining at least one facet of hard determinism and at least one facet of soft determinism, or what he calls compatibilism in the reading. So just know that what he tries to do then in this part of this chapter in 2.6 is explain to you what are the implications according to the hard determinist. If determinism as a metaphysical theory involving the principle of universal causation is true, then what are the implications according to the hard determinist in terms of whether or not we have free will and whether or not it makes sense to hold people morally responsible for their actions, or what sense it even means to talk about moral responsibility. So that stuff that I just scrolled through, that's where you're going to get more information about determinism. That's where you're going to get information about what a determinist might say about predicting human behavior, its scope, its implications. How might a determinist, and hence a hard determinist, explain the activity of deliberating and the will? That's also, okay, and then following that in the chapter, you will get information about the hard determinist take on the link between causality, or the principle of universal causation, how that is used to explain criminal behavior, and the implications in terms of crime, punishment, moral responsibility. And then just know the gist of Spinoza's story about a falling stone. What is that supposed to show, and how does it reflect determinism, and especially hard determinism?